Right, I was watching the Atheist Experience today, and a Christian called in, and his argument for the truth of the resurrection was that because the apostles died horribly, excruciatingly, and they were martyred in great pain, the resurrection must have really happened because they wouldn't have died for a lie. They must have died absolutely believing that the resurrection did happen, and this must be because they saw Jesus after he was resurrected. Otherwise, why would they die? They wouldn't die for a lie. So J. Mike spent some time rebutting this, and quite rightly pointing out that they weren't necessarily lying, or they might earnestly believe that the resurrection did happen, but that doesn't mean that it did happen, which is a standard rebuttal. And we've got plenty of examples of people who've died for beliefs which they believed to be true, but were not necessarily so. So, nevertheless, I wanted to go back and look at history, look at the history of the New Testament, church writings, etc., and determine how actually did the apostles die, and how much evidence have we got that they were martyred, and if so, did they have the opportunity to recant? Do we know what they believed when they died? That type of thing. Because some of the claims that were made by this caller, that, I don't know, somebody was cut in half, and, some of the other claims, I wondered whether there was any truth to that, because I haven't really in detail looked at how the apostles died. So I've gone to actually a Christian site on the history of the New Testament, and I've gone through each and every apostle and kind of collated the evidence and the way they died, etc., and how we know. So anyway, without further ado, let's just go through. So there were actually 14 apostles in total, because there were 12. Judas died, and they had to bring in, I think that Matthias replaced Judas, and then of course there was the apostle Paul of the Damascus Road experience fame. So in reality, there were 14 in all. Only 2 of those deaths were recorded in the Bible, James and Judas. So let's go through them anyway. Simon Peter. By church tradition, he was crucified upside down. Now, this comes from the apocryphal Acts of Peter, a non-canonical 2nd century document, which details all the amazing deeds that Peter did, Simon Peter, healing people, doing miracles, etc. He wanted to be crucified upside down because that's Jesus. He didn't want to be crucified the way that Jesus was crucified because he wasn't worthy enough. He was crucified by Nero, 64 AD. Now, it seems that there was a great fire in Rome. Nero was raging and blaming the Christians, and it seems that hundreds or thousands of Christians were actually put to death. And Peter happened to be one of those. We don't know for sure, we don't even know with a really good level of deal of confidence that this was the case, because the first report is in the 2nd century, over 100 years after he reportedly did die. So we don't know. It seems unlikely that he would have been able to choose which way up. He was upside down on the cross. I would have thought that Romans would just simply disregard that. Excuse me, I want to be crucified hanging upside down because my Lord and Master Jesus Christ was crucified the right way up, and I'm not worthy to be crucified like that. So by special request, can I go upside down, please? I can't really see that happening. I think that if he did that, they would have stuck a knife in his belly and told him he was going to be crucified however it came. So I think that that's very unlikely and just a legend that was written down later. So it looks to me like he just got caught up in a historical slaying of Christians by Nero. If that is the case. So Andrew, similar type of thing. He was crucified reportedly, again according to a third century document, so like 200 years after he died, it appeared. that he was crucified on a cross the shape of an X. Again, because he considered himself not to be worthy. Although it has to be said that even the early church is suspicious of the Acts of Andrew, the set of writings from the 3rd century that this story is taken from. So James reported in the Bible, the brother of Jesus, executed with a sword, executed by Herod II, who at the time was slaying as many Christians as he could get his hands on because he wanted to please his Jewish subjects. Again then, we've got another apostle dying because he just happened to get caught up in a historical purge of Christians. This also was reported by Eusebius of Caesarea, who's quoting Clement of Alexandria in the 4th century. Clement of Alexandria was actually, he was born 100 years after James died. So him as a kind of secondary or third source is coming well after the event. And there's a story attached to this which is worth reading out. So when James was being taken to be executed, in the court there was a guard who was so moved by the dignity with which James comported himself that he revealed that he was a Christian and he wanted to die alongside James, and he was duly obliged. Well, again, this is a story, well after the event, over 100 years after the event, reported 200 years after the event. Okay, so John apparently died of natural causes. The Apostle John, this was reported by Tertullian, a Christian writer who lived Common Era 155 to 220. It was reported that the Romans took him to a Colosseum. So it was reported in one case that he died of natural causes, but there's a legend. I'll read out the legend. Yeah, the legend is that the Romans took him to the Colosseum, stuck him in a vat of oil. He crawled out unscathed, and when the people in the Colosseum saw that, they all converted to Christianity. Okay. Right, Philip the Apostle, often confused with Philip the Evangelist. We don't know. There are many possibilities. There are reports of martyrdom. There are reports that while Philip was being executed, crucified, who were also hanging upside down, that he was preaching all the while he was suffering, and that he was converting people. This appeared in a 4th century Gnostic text. So we're looking at 200-300 years after the event. Completely unreliable and uncorroborated. Bartholomew, he was reportedly, according to tradition, flayed then beheaded, but there's nothing really much until Fox's Book of Martyrs, which appeared in the 16th century, over a millennia after, that he was beaten and crucified. Other traditions have him beaten and drowned. Thomas, in the Acts of Thomas, 3rd century document, he was martyred in India, stabbed with spears. Let's keep going. I'm not really finding much here which has got any sort of historical basis to it. Matthew. There are several conflicting accounts. Clement of Alexandria is reporting that he died naturally, and he's quoting Herodian. There are various other traditions, some of which claim he was martyred, but they all differ in method of death and place of death. James, the son of Alphaeus, who could be the brother of Jesus, James the Just, or could be the son of Alphaeus. There's some sort of confusion. Various claims he was martyred, but it seems there's a lot of confusion about the identity of him and which James he was, and the stories all seem to contradict each other. Jude, by tradition, he was martyred in Syria on a missionary journey. This is told in the Acts of Simon and Jude, a document which is considered unreliable. Simon the Zealot, centuries after his death was reported. Some say he was martyred, others say he died of old age. This is the problem. Very few, if any at all, contemporary reports of these people dying, of these apostles dying. The reports are all like over 100 years after and uncorroborated, unconfirmed. It's difficult really to say with any level of confidence how any of these died. Judas, we know that he died. It was reported in the New Testament, and we know that he didn't die because he believed that Jesus was resurrected. Matthias, now he replaced Judas, and I think he only gets 1 or 2 mentions. He's quite an obscure apostle. There's not really too much about him, just some unreliable claims that he was martyred. Finally, Paul. Now, Paul's the interesting one. Of course, one of the early church fathers, probably the most important. He really got Christianity moving. He was very active. He was apparently beheaded by Nero in 68 AD. This was reported by Clement of Rome, who in a contemporary letter to the Corinthians delivered the news to that church in Corinth that Paul had been beheaded by Nero. And the Corinthians regarded the letters of Clement so important, there are more than one, that they actually read them out alongside the Bible. So this report by Clement probably looks to me like the most convincing to me of all of the apostles, because it was contemporary, and it seems to me quite probable that Paul was indeed beheaded by Nero. Nero was slaying everybody, left, right and centre, and he particularly enjoyed slaying Christians. As we know, he slayed hundreds or thousands after the Great Fire of Rome. So he slew Paul as well, and we don't know what Paul was to Nero, whether Nero knew of Paul's significance, or whether to Nero Paul was just another Christian. We don't know the exact circumstances, whether Paul was in a situation where he was saying that Jesus was resurrected and I will die for that belief. No, it doesn't look like that. It doesn't look like that at all. There's not enough detail here to draw any kind of conclusions, only that he was executed. And we don't even know if he was executed, and particularly because he was a Christian. Maybe he was, but I haven't got that detail here. So I'm afraid that's all that I can really find. And I got all this from a Christian website that seems to have quite a good resource, quite a good breakdown on the evidence. I mean, obviously, it being a Christian website, they're crediting a lot of these later reports with more kind of authority than they should be doing, in my opinion. They're giving them more weight than they should be, but they do admit that at the beginning, when they preface it all, they do admit, and they say that we don't know with any level of historical accuracy how any of the apostles died, but we've got these reports and we're going to give them to you. So they admit that. And because they admit that, I don't think that Christians have got any right to be coming on to call-in shows and saying that the apostles wouldn't have died for a lie, because we've got very little evidence at all how the apostles died, whether they were martyred at all, whether they died of old age. We just don't know. All we've got are theological documents, a lot of which would have been written to inspire belief, and it's more inspiring to believe that the apostles died believing that Jesus was resurrected, or that they were martyred. This is more likely to bolster and boost Christianity than that an apostle just died of old age. So I don't consider any of them to be reliable. Paul probably, but I don't find it a convincing argument at all, because the historical detail just isn't there to draw those conclusions. And even if we had fantastic historical detail that they all died with the words on their lips, Jesus was truly resurrected. I saw Jesus Christ after he was resurrected. I saw the holes in his hands, and it's true, and I'm dying for that belief. Even if we had signed documents from all the apostles to that, plus corroborating evidence from historians who were contemporary, saying it was a remarkable thing that these apostles died in great pain for their beliefs, even then I wouldn't be convinced that the resurrection happened, because of Hume's basic principle that you reject the greater miracle. Okay, so just to conclude then, the original question, how do the apostles die? I would say that on the whole, we don't really know. Possibly we know how Paul died. I think it's probably got the best evidence out of any of the apostles. But as for the rest of them, we just don't know. The historical evidence is not strong enough to determine whether they were martyred or whether they died of natural deaths or some other way. So that's about it, really. If any Christians do say to you, make any claims along those lines, that that they were martyred horribly and they died for their beliefs and they wouldn't have died for a lie, you've just got to say to them, have you actually studied, have you actually analyzed the historicity of those claims about how they died? Because I've done it and I've found that the evidence just isn't there to support what you're saying. So that's all for now. Hope you enjoyed that video. Hope you found it informative. I'll be back again soon. Bye for now.